Yeah, Eric Erda and I live in Albuquerque, New Mexico. So I want to first say thank you so much for a lifetime of knowledge you have both graciously shared with all of us. You've contributed greatly to push our species forward. Moreover, you've taught all of us here, along with many, many millions not here, how to behave more rationally, treat one another with more love, and lead more fulfilling lives. And for that, I want to say a very sincere thank you.
Thank you.
As for my question, I want to ask about Berkshire Hathaway Energy and the unique structure that has evolved there, given that Berkshire doesn't own 100% of the company. The first part of that question is related to Greg's ownership and his corresponding incentive alignment with overall Berkshire. Now, there's a wise man named Charlie that in 1995, at a speech to Harvard, taught us how important incentives are to human behavior. I would conservatively say that Greg's stake in BHE is worth more than $500 million at present. And I'm curious if you can share any plans that you have to convert his Berkshire Hathaway Energy ownership to Berkshire stock. And if there isn't a plan to do this, can you please explain why we shouldn't be concerned about Greg's incentive structure going forward? The second part is about leverage at the entity. You have always said that BHE operates with an appropriate amount of leverage given its earning power. With that said, it's still a very, very large debt figure in relation to current earnings, especially with what we have become accustomed to at Berkshire. And I'm curious, if Berkshire owned 100% of Berkshire Hathaway Energy, would you still operate the business with the same amount of leverage?
Okay, thank you. The second part is the easiest one to answer, so I'll take that. And I'll throw the first one back to Charlie. But the Berkshire Hathaway Energy actually is required with its regulated utilities, and it basically started pretty much with regulated utilities, and still is dominated by that, and we're interested in buying more regulated utilities. It's required in different ways by different states and by different regulatory authorities to have a large amount of debt, because the regulatory authorities will say in Iowa or to pick any state, the regulatory authorities are going to say you can get debt money cheaper than you can get equity money, which historically has largely been, almost always been true. And they say that since we're going to allow you a return on equity, we'll say, just pick a figure, but let's say they allow us a return on equity of 9%, and we can borrow a lot of capital at 3%, they say it'll result in higher rates to customers if you use it, put in all equity. We would love to have all equity in our utilities, but the regulator wouldn't stand for it, because it would result in, under the traditional system, it would result in higher prices to consumers. So that's built into the system. And our regulator wouldn't allow us essentially to get the same return on equity and have an all equity structure. The answer is, we put, well, you actually saw in the film earlier, which the people that are listening or hearing the webcast didn't see, but just in Iowa, we recently got approval to spend $300 billion, but they want us. Iowa has a history, and like every other state in the union, except Nebraska, which is all public power, but every private powers, they have a history of wanting X percent to be in debt. They want you to raise a lot of money in debt because it's cheaper, means cheaper power for the consumer. So the answer is, if we owned 100% of Berkshire Energy, we would absolutely be following the same we would be operating pursuant to what the utility commissions tell us they want us to do. That they represent the people of those states. Now, Charlie, do you want
Well, the other one's simple too. It's a historical accident. It's not causing any big tension or breaches of fiduciary duty. We had the same problem with Walter Scott, who was the director for years and years, and owned stock in the same company, also an historical accident. I just don't think it's a big problem at all. I see no behavior from Greg ever that isn't in the best interest of Berkshire.
Yeah. And we've had various percentages of Berkshire Hathaway Energy ever since we bought it in around 2000. And it happened, we were at my sister who's here, we were at her house, and there was a party going on, and 20 or 30, probably 30 people. And Walter said to me, if you got a minute or two, I'd like to talk to you about something. So we went in the library or someplace, and Walter says, we've got this company, and it doesn't seem to fit the public mold very well, and would you want to buy in and go private? I said, sure. Depends on the price. And when we got back to Omaha, I was out on the West Coast. We got back to Omaha. We met with Dave Sokol, who was the big holder, aside from Walter. And we agreed on a price. And I remember Walter saying to Dave, don't negotiate with Warren. He'll tell you to forget it and he'll do something else. And so we bought it. And so it was kind of a weird structure from the start. And we had a public utility holding company act to deal with and all kinds of things. And it's evolved, and it now has us with 91% roughly, and it has Walter's estate, and I don't know where that goes and at all. And Walter never talked to me about it, and I never asked him about it. But it's one way or another, interest connected with him and the estate now, close to 8, I guess. And Greg's got 1. And from our standpoint, if we made a deal with if they ever came to us and the Scott interest wanted to do something, we'd say fine with him. We'll do the same thing with Greg if he wants to, and he probably would want to. But from our standpoint, I've never seen any decision remotely. If I thought that would make a difference, he would not be. He just wouldn't be the right kind of person to run Berkshire. And the problem, of course, is that you've got lots of process that can be involved with insiders and everything. And I've got no interest in, as long as I'm alive, my interests are 100% with Berkshire. And the board would probably, and to some extent, a little reluctantly, but they just say, well, if Warren thinks the deal's okay, it must be okay, which is true. And so I could make a deal with anybody and it doesn't get all messed up with process. But on the other hand, if I'm not around, the pressures are the directors to do whatever the lawyers tell them to do, and the lawyers tell them to do this and that, and then they want to bring in investment bankers to make a value. And the whole thing is a game from that point forward. And it's expensive. It takes a lot of time. So it would be better if it happened while I'm alive and around. But there's no reason. We'd rather have 100% than 91%, obviously, because more earnings for Berkshire. But there's no reason to try and do anything with either the Scott interests or Greg, unless they want to do it. And the logical thing is if anything happened with the Scotts, we'd certainly offer to Greg. But who knows what happens in the future. The one thing I guarantee you, Berkshire Hathaway holders will never be taken advantage of, and you can sue my estate or something like that if anybody felt differently about that. It isn't going to happen. But it's a lot easier if it's done while I'm around, actually, than if it's done later. But
I wish we had 20 more conflicts of interest just like it.
Yeah, that's exactly true. Yeah, it's a perfectly logical question. I mean, but it is not a problem, and any answer that's arrived at will be good for all concerned. Right now, I've got no feeling that I have no knowledge at all of where the stock that the Scotts have goes or how they feel about it or anything, and that's up to them. Walter was our partner, and as far as we're concerned, we treat anybody connected with them as our partner, and they know that. They don't have to worry about us taking advantage of them, and we can understand why. If they don't do anything, we can understand that. If they want to do something, we can understand that. It's a good question, though. Thank you.